Okay. I'm Jay Porter, and I fight for truth, justice, and the right to wear spandex. Good afternoon, Vacaville. So, question, is anybody here today 100 years old or older? So that means none of us are antiques. It means we're classic, it means we're vintage, and in my case, I'm shanghai sheep. So, a little bit about myself. I traveled for 40 years all over the United States. I worked in animal management. That's called construction. And when I retired, I took up stand-up comedy. I wanted to be one of these internet influencers, but I was just unwilling to get the boob job. I know. So I'm a clean comedian, or at least I try to be. And so we comedians, we all have our dreams. And my dream is, I don't know if you've seen it on YouTube, it's something called the Dry Bar. It's in Provo, Utah, and they have the best clean comedians from all over the United States go and perform there. And I have a fantasy, I'm kind of looking out there like there you're looking at me. And it's kind of a rural crowd. And I'm content with that. And I'm looking out and they're wearing their work boots and their jeans and their red and black checkered shirts and their Bass Pro Shop hats, and that's just the women in the audience. So I traveled a lot in my business. Learned all those 40 years. A little bit about myself. I was originally born and raised in West Virginia. Don't hold that against me. And West Virginians, I think we're kind of some of the nicest people around. You got to know us. And there's a saying in the South, well, bless her, well, bless your heart. Now, growing up in West Virginia, we would say, well, bless her heart, she fell and broke her arm. In the rest of the South, they would say, well, bless his heart, you know he was conceived at the family reunion. And so my biggest claim to fame growing up was that I was the West Virginia Tech dancing golden bear. That meant once a week I got to put on a bear suit and have some fun. But now there's these groups of people, they're called furries. I can imagine if they'd approached me back then and said, you know, we hear you wear a bear suit. Now we all get together on the weekend and we dress up in animal costumes and party. And I would have said, that's the dumbest, craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. But count me in, I'll be there. And so, when I left college, my first job, I was working in New Mexico, rural New Mexico. There were no single women. You'd go out on a Saturday night and the cowboys and Indians would be fighting over who got to dance with an armadillo. And it was there that I was introduced to my very first cult. Y'all remember this cult, the cult of Amway. For those of you who don't know about Amway, that's where you try to operate a Costco out of your garage. And so I was stuck at work one day. It was raining worse than it's been raining here the last couple of days. And these group of Amway zombies, they were sitting around the table listening to a cassette tape of what we would call now an Amway influencer. Do you like breakfast? Do you like to eat ham and eggs and bacon? Don't you just want to have to kill yourself because you're listening to this tape? Well, from there I headed west. I headed past the desert. I headed over the mountains. It was green. There were palm trees. It was paradise. It was Bakersfield. And it was there that I was introduced to one of the most unusual methods of restaurant management I've ever seen. See, I was having breakfast at the Buck Owens Entertainment Center. And I looked down at my plate, and my toast had no butter on it. Now, most people don't like their toast or their women dry and crusty, but anyway, then I noticed this lady was walking around giving out butter pats, and I could only imagine the conversation that she'd had with the restaurant manager. Nerline, these people have been eating way too much butter. They have been piling up on the pats. I'm going to put you in charge of butter management and distribution. Now, I can't pay you any more right now, but just think how that's going to look on your resume in a few years. Now, for a while, I worked in Connecticut. There's good people everywhere, but you got to understand, those people, their families have been there for 350 years. And they're not used to anybody who may have been from south of the Mason-Dixon line. So one afternoon, me and my wife, we're going into a place. I was going to pick up some parts for where I worked. And I walked in and asked for the parts. And this lady from behind the counter, when she heard my accent, "You're not from around here, are you?" And I thought about saying back to her, "No, ma'am. You see, last week I was down south fighting with the rebels. Now I'm up here working in aerospace and stealing chickens on the weekend." Thank you, ma'am. The one place I lived was if y'all don't know, there's a place called the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. There's part of it sticks out from Michigan, it goes up north of Wisconsin. It's where the hoot owls live with the chickens. And we were living 90 miles north of Green Bay, Wisconsin. And it was there I witnessed some of the sickest activities I've ever seen in the United States. I saw young couples going south on a honeymoon in Green Bay. And so me and my wife, one time we went down to Green Bay and we stayed at a hotel, the Best Western, right across from Lambeau Field where the Packers play. And they offered us the honeymoon suite. And that got us to thinking, what would a Green Bay honeymoon be like? Well, I'm imagining the mother talking to the daughter a couple of nights before the wedding. And she goes, "Honey, I want you to wear this Aaron Rodgers jersey on your wedding night. You see, I wore the Brett Favre jersey and your daddy really liked it. And your granny, well, she wore the Mark Starr jersey and it started a family tradition. And I'm going to give you this little tea towel here and you can wear it like a center towel. And just say, honey, push it in the end zone." And so I thought I would kind of derail everything and talk just a little bit about politics today. Everybody's upset about everything. Everybody's mad about everything. People even upset about the title of a science fiction movie. It deals with bird flu from outer space. Can you imagine people being upset about a movie called Illegal Aliens? Okay. And then, I'm going to just lay it out right now. I'm a big, huge supporter of MAGA. But it's not what you think it is. I think all of y'all can get behind this. MAGA means make arthritis go away. Can we get behind that, folks?
Yay!
And then, a lot of people concerned about what's going on in Washington, D.C. right now, what's going on in the White House. I'm going to explain it today so simply everybody can leave here with an understanding. And that is what's going on at the White House. Right now, our White House is like an overly tight pair of men's jeans. I'm going to repeat that. Our White House is like an overly tight pair of men's jeans. No ballroom at all. I said, I tried to be clean. And so, the world has changed a lot, some for the good, some for the end, over the years. One of the things that's changed is our telephone. Now, if you're like me, you were raised with one landline in the house, and it worked very well. But there was one problem with that landline. No privacy. So, if you were a young man and you had managed to get a young lady's phone number, when you called her house and she was still living at home, there were four opportunities there. First, young lady answered the phone. No problem. Brother or sister answered the phone. No problem, they'd relay the message. Third option, the mother. Not always a friendly voice, but her maternal instinct to have grandchildren overrode the fact that you just might be a homicidal maniac. And finally, the worst option of all, the father answered the phone. Now, this was someone who kind of sounded like a reject from Swamp People. And when he answered that phone and said, "Who are you? And where is my daughter? And where did you meet my daughter?" That's DOTTER. You were suddenly reduced to being like a 14-year-old. "I'm Joey Porter, I'm attending West Virginia Tech, I'm studying engineering, I've never been a member of the Communist Party." Anyway, like I say, this was a man who they had that 23andMe DNA thing back then. His Cro-Magnon markers would have just been off the chart. So now we've got smartphones. And the problem with smartphones is we got a whole lot of stupid people with smartphones. You know, it used to be you would go out and you'd run into somebody and you'd talk to them, and then you'd go home and talk to your wife and go, "That's the dumbest individual I ever met in my life." Now, with social media, you can meet that person online all day long. And they're posting things like, there's a dead bird in the street. Does anybody know where? Does anybody know where to buy toothpaste in Vacaville? And like I say, I tell my wife all the time, the power of the universe in cat pictures. And television. Remember, we had 3 channels, and you check the newspaper for what was on. If you were really fancy, you might buy a TV guide to learn a little bit more about what was on TV. But you knew what was on the really big shows. And when I'm talking a really big show, I'm talking about 8 o'clock Sunday night on CBS. Right? Really big shoe. We got the Flying Zambinis. For you youngsters, we've got Topo Chicho. Hi, and then we had really good sitcoms. The other day I saw one of those. I saw the old Gilligan's Island. And I watched it. I was so excited about it, I told one of my friends. And of course, he asked me the big Gilligan's Island question: Ginger or Mary Ann? And I thought for a minute, and I said, you know what, I'm my age, this is how it's starting to look pretty darn good. And then TV now. What the heck? We got all these channels and nothing on. Primetime TV, old game shows. Game shows that from 60 years ago remakes of new game shows that don't make any sense. Night on ABC TV, it's gender hijinks galore on What Pronoun Am I? And then you got reality TV. Shows like the 600-pound pimple-popping housewives of Orange County. And then you get to the weekend, it goes really off the rails. Ancient alien theorists. Where was that on career day in high school? I mean, I could have been a crop circle decoder, an alien autopsy leader. And so, being retired the last few years like I have time to think about things. And one of the things, I was in a comedy club, was I got to thinking about women's fragrances and how the industry is getting it all wrong. You see, I went to this place and I forgot my wallet at home. And as the evening went on, I was getting hungry as a bear. And then these women started walking past my table. And as they walked by, I was like, you smell like nachos. And one thing I was thinking about the other day, why on earth would you name a brand of condoms Trojans? Now, when I think of Trojans, I think about a gift in Arena Gate. Inside that gift, there's an army. And when that army escapes, it causes chaos and destruction. So speaking of chaos and destruction, I've got two grandsons, aged 5 and 7. I'm driving them home the other day. They're in the back seat, and the little one pipes up, when I grow up, I'm going to buy a blue bearded dragon, but not off the dark web. And then the older one pipes in and goes, yeah, that's a sketchy website. So grandparents here today, do your grandchildren and great-grandchildren a favor. Please expose them to those old, extremely violent, politically incorrect Looney Tunes where they're going to learn about classical music from Bugs Bunny and theoretical physics from the Coyote. Can we do that, folks? So, my wife is my biggest fan in comedy. She's here today. We've been married for 42 years. Can we give it up for Mrs. Porter? And so, people ask us all the time, how have we stayed together? And I give the most logical response I can. You haven't seen me naked, have you? And so when you've been married that long, you develop higher levels of communication. And I'm going to share one of those stories right now. You see, I was up early in the morning, as I often am. I was in the kitchen. I was getting ready to do my Tai Chi workout. I turned on our electric tea kettle and it started boiling. Right about the time it started boiling, I heard this rapping in the wall. And it sounded intelligent. And it was scaring me. And about that time, the time the rapping stopped, the phone, or not the phone, but the teapot quit boiling. I said, oh, it was just vibrating against the metal canister behind it. About a minute later, my wife walks in mad as a hornet, looks at me and goes, didn't you hear me knocking on the wall? SOS, SOS. I was out of toilet paper. Like I say, folks, higher levels of communication. So I'm going to finish up here with a little story today. My wife and I, we love to travel. And a few years ago, we went and visited my wife's uncle in Montana. Pearl Harbor survivor. Trained some of the first U.S. Special Forces in World War II. Guy was literally is like a legend in the Guam. So anyway, we're visiting there People like that, they don't stop. They don't quit reinventing themselves. And at age 98, this guy had developed a new career. Prairie dog sniper. You see, it's a big deal up there. The prairie dogs make holes in the ground and let the cows break their legs, etc. So he had went out and got a military-grade sniper rifle, age 98, taking out prairie dogs from 400 yards away. So we're getting ready to leave, and we're out in the garage, and he shows my wife his prize sniper rifle. She was raised hunting. She picks up the gun, she looks through the sight, she feels the trigger. We don't think anything of it. Till about 10 hours later, we're in the Salt Lake City airport, and she's going through, and TSA picks up gunpowder residue on her. Now, does my wife raise her hand to TSA, which stands for tension, stress, and anxiety, and say, excuse me, well, this morning I was with my uncle, the prairie dog sniper, and I was handling his sniper rifle. No, she just sits there and just goes, well, really? Could you imagine gunpowder residue on me? Well, who would have thought? A little bit later, TSA goes, well, ma'am, that test, it must have just been a false positive. But on another leg of the trip, I wasn't smart. You see, men our age, we develop what I might call a leakage problem. We dribble, and I'm not talking a basketball. And not too long after I had developed my leakage problem, we were heading out on this trip. And I didn't think anything of it. I put my pee pad that morning and we headed out. And I've got an artificial knee and I got an artificial hip. And I always volunteer that and I'll get a little extra wanding. So I go through the metal detector and he does his little bit of extra wanding. But then he continues. And suddenly, I know he's going around wanding me around my groin in a circle. And then he's patting me in a groin in a circle. And I look back at the computer screen behind me, and there was an outline of my body, and there was a white rectangle over my groin area. And it was that moment I knew that I was a suspected pee pad terrorist. Well, the wanding continued, and the padding continued, and this goes on, and finally I had enough. Like I say, I wasn't as smart as my wife. I said, excuse me, sir, I am wearing a pee pad. If you will just allow me to reach in, pull it out, you can examine it, and then we can all go about our business. Well, I learned at that time that you just can't threaten to brandish a pee pad of mass destruction at the airport. So, like any good employee, he got his supervisor involved, and not a supervisor by accident. The first thing he noticed was I was wearing a belt. So I removed my belt. The wanding continued and the padding continued and this continued. And then he started to frisk me up and down my sides, up and down my sides. And because I wasn't wearing a belt, my pants started to fall off. So out of the goodness of his heart, he allowed me to take one hand and hold my pants up, put the other one in the air like I was having some kind of religious experience, while he continued to do this frisking. Well, this went on for a little bit, and I was feeling helpless, hapless, vulnerable. And I turned around looking for the one person I could depend on, my wife, who had turned her back on me and was quarreling in laughter. Soon after that, the TSA guy performed an official maneuver called the crotch grapple. After the appropriate or inappropriate crotch grapple was performed, I was informed I was no longer a threat to national security. I stumbled forward, shoeless, my pants still about to fall off, but as God is my witness, I will never wear a pee pad to the airport again. Thank you all so much.